Mist curled low over the riverbed as dawn painted the forest in pale light. Herds of small reptiles scattered from the shadows, their calls echoing sharp and uneasy. From between ferns and jagged rocks, a figure stepped forward tall, with a strange hump rising along its back. Concavinator moved with the balance of a dancer and the power of a killer. Its eyes gleamed with focus, every step pressing silence into the soil. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Prey froze at the edges of the clearing, knowing that the hunter had awakened and the hunt was about to begin. The ancient forest, what is now Spain, thrived on the sun of the early Cretaceous. Thick ferns carpeted the ground, while cycads and conifers reached high into the sky. Insects buzzed in swarms above the still pools where dragonflies skimmed across the surface. Small reptiles scurried between roots, while mammals no larger than a hand darted into burrows at the faintest sound. It was a world alive with motion, yet balanced on the edge of constant danger. In this land moved a predator unlike any other. Concavinator was not the largest hunter of its time, yet its form carried both grace and menace. Its long body was balanced on sturdy hind legs built for sudden bursts of speed. Its arms, though shorter than those of some rivals, were tipped with sharp claws strong enough to seize struggling prey. Most striking of all was a ridge that rose along its back, forming a high hump near the hips. This feature made its silhouette unforgettable even in the half-light of dawn. Concavinator ruled not through size alone, but through cunning. While larger predators prowled the plains, it used the forest as its ally. Every step was measured, each movement timed with the rhythm of the land. Where shadows gathered along the trees, Concavinator slipped unseen. Where prey thought safety lay in herds, or thick brush its patience proved them wrong. As the sun climbed higher, the forest stirred with life. A small herd of iguanodons fed on low shrubs, their necks swinging in rhythm as they stripped branches clean. Juveniles remained close to the center, guarded by larger adults who raised their heads often to sniff the air. Their ears twitched at the calls of distant birds, yet they found no reason to flee. To them the forest offered safety in numbers. They did not yet sense the eyes that watched from the shadows. Concavinator stood still behind a fallen log, its body pressed low to the ground. Every muscle tense beneath its skin, waiting for the perfect moment. It studied the herd with unblinking focus, choosing targets with a predator's patience. A young iguanodon wandered near the edge of the group, straying further than the rest. Its steps were clumsy, its focus fixed on tender leaves. Concavinator's gaze fixed upon it like a hawk ready to strike. But the hunt did not begin immediately. Concavinator was a master waiting. Each breath matched the rhythm of the forest, each twitch of its tail balanced against the movement of prey. To rush without care was to fail. To wait was to win. The herd grazed, unaware that death crouched only steps away. Far above in the branches of a tall conifer, a flock of primitive birds took flight with sudden cries. The iguanodonts froze their heads, rising sharply, ears twitching. Concavinator remained motionless, hidden in the stillness of the forest. The birds circled once before vanishing into distance, and calm returned. The young iguanodont lowered its head again, wandering further toward the stream. Now the predator moved. Slowly, silently, one step, then another. Each clawed foot pressed into the soil without sound. Its long tail swayed to keep balance, its head low, and eyes locked on the target. The air grew heavy, as if the forest itself understood what was about to unfold. Yet fate did not always favor the hunter. A sudden gust of wind shifted through the trees, carrying the scent of predator across the clearing. The adult iguanodont nearest the stream snapped its head around, eyes wide with alarm. With a bellow, it stomped its heavy feet, and the herd scattered in a storm of motion. Leaves flew into the air, dust rose from the ground, and the moment of perfect silence was shattered. Concavinator lunged from the brush with explosive speed, its body a blur of power. It aimed for the young straggler, but the sudden warning had saved the prey. The juvenile bolted clumsy yet fast, chased closely by its elders. The herd thundered away, tails whipping and heads low. Concavinator snapped its jaws shut on empty air, its target lost in the chaos. The predator slowed its pace, its hunt ended in failure. Its chest rose and fell with deep breaths, while its eyes glared at the fleeing herd. Yet there was no frustration, in its mind only calculation. Every hunt was a risk, and failure was part pattern. The herd would return in time, hunger would make them bold again, and Concavinator would still be waiting, for now it turned toward the river. Its long claws brushed the soil as it walked with steady strides. Water shimmered in the light, and the scent of fish carried on the breeze. Concavenator bent its head and drank deeply the cool liquid, easing the heat of the chase. Small creatures fled at its presence, lizards darting into crevices, frogs leaping into the stream. None were worth the effort. The predator sought larger prey to sustain its strength. Beyond the river, the land opened into rocky ridges, rising like jagged teeth against the horizon. Here the ground grew dry and sparse, yet life endured. Herds of small ornithopods darted between patches of ferns, their movements quick and nervous. Above them a pair of pterosaurs glided on the wind, their wings casting fleeting shadows across the land. Concavenator watched them all with sharp eyes, calculating where next to move. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Concavenator settled in a clearing, its body low, its gaze scanning the distance. The world around it hummed with life, yet the predator remained still as stone. Patience was its greatest weapon. Night would bring new challenges as the forest came alive with the calls of nocturnal hunters. Concavenator rested in the half-light, storing strength for the battles ahead. Its hump rose like a mountain against the fading sun, a mark of its uniqueness, a banner of survival. It was not the largest nor the fiercest, but it was cunning and relentless. In this world where every day balanced life against death, Concavenator thrived not by chance, but by skill. The forest belonged to no one, yet within its shadows the predator claimed its place. The hunt would begin again, and again, each moment a test of survival. The story of Concavenator was not of a beast driven only by hunger, but of a creature shaped by the land it ruled. Its life was a constant rhythm of waiting, striking, failing, and rising again. And in that rhythm it carved its legacy into the ancient earth, a legacy carried forward by the silence that fell each time it stepped into view. The days that followed in the forests of ancient Spain were marked by both scarcity and opportunity. The dry season pressed its weight on the land. Pools shrank to muddy patches, and streams ran shallow. Ferns wilted beneath the relentless sun, while the ground cracked in long lines that split the soil. Herds of herbivores grew restless. They wandered further in search of fresh shoots, and each step carried them closer to danger. Concavenator thrived in such times. Its body was lean, yet built for endurance. Hunger gnawed at its belly, but hunger was a familiar companion. The predator knew how to wait. When the land grew harsh and prey grew careless, the hunter's patience became its greatest ally. One afternoon, a group of hypsilophodonts crept into the valley. They were small plant eaters, quick on their feet and cautious by nature. Their bodies were built like runners, with long tails held stiff for balance. They gathered near a shaded grove, nibbling at the last green growth among the ferns. Their sharp eyes scanned often, yet the heat dulled their senses. Concavenator crouched behind a cluster of boulders, its eyes fixed on the smallest member of the group, who strayed near the edges. Slowly it shifted forward, each step measured. Dust rose with the faintest whisper beneath its feet. The hypsilophodonts raised their heads in unison at the sound of a crow's cry, but saw nothing. The predator froze, every muscle locked in stillness. Moments stretched like ages. The group relaxed again, lowering their heads to feed. That was the instant Concavenator chose to strike. With explosive speed it burst from cover, tail lashing for balance. Its jaws opened wide, teeth gleaming. The ground trembled as it charged. The herd scattered in a storm of motion. Their feet drummed the soil, tails whipping like spears. Concavenator lunged to the straggler, but the creature darted sideways with unexpected agility. Dust blinded the predator's vision, and in that split second the prey slipped through the brush. Concavenator snapped at empty air, jaws clashing with the sound of bone against bone. Its slowed, panting jaws dripping with saliva. Hunger remained unsatisfied, yet its resolve did not break. Each failed hunt was part of survival. The herd had escaped, but many more would wander through the valley. The predator licked its jaws, tasting dust and leaves instead of blood. Then it melted back into the trees, its silhouette vanishing among shadows. Night brought fresh challenges. The forest echoed with the calls of nocturnal hunters. Small mammals scurried beneath the cover of fallen logs. Pterosaurs circled overhead, diving for fish in the shallows of streams. From time to time, the distant roar of a rival predator rolled across the ridges. Concavenator listened to every sound, gauging its place in the rhythm of life. On the third night of waiting opportunity came. A juvenile stegosaur had wandered too far from its herd. Its body was smaller than the adults, though still heavy with muscle. Plates rose jagged along its back, glowing faint under the pale light of the moon. Its tail tipped with spikes swung lazily as it foraged among cycads. Alone it was vulnerable. Concavenator stalked low, using rocks for cover. The stegosaur tore leaves with careless strength, unaware of the shadow that crept closer. Each step brought the predator nearer, each breath a whisper of patience. When the distance closed enough, Concavenator lunged. The stegosaur reared back with a startled cry. Its tail lashed with sudden fury, striking the ground with force that shook loose stones. Concavenator's circled eyes locked on the plates and spikes. One wrong move could mean broken bones, or worse. It darted forward, claws reaching for the softer flank. The stegosaur twisted with surprising speed, its tail whipping past the predator's head. Air whistled as the spikes missed by a breath. The fight stretched in tense bursts. Concavenator struck again, and again, each attempt deflected by the swinging tail. The stegosaur bellowed in rage, stomping heavy feet into the soil. At last, with a burst of energy, the juvenile spun full circle tail, cutting the air with deadly precision. Concavenator leapt back, the spikes grazing its thigh, leaving a shallow wound. Pain flared hot, but the predator did not falter. It crouched, low eyes narrowed and chest heaving. The stegosaur stood its ground, sides heaving as well. Both combatants faced each other, locked in stalemate. Then from the distance came the low calls of the stegosaur herd. Their silhouettes appeared on the ridge, moving with heavy steps toward the sound. Concavenator hesitated. To remain was to face the wrath of adults many times stronger than the juvenile. To retreat was to live to hunt again. Instinct made the choice simple. With a final growl, the predator backed away, slipping into the shadows of the trees. The juvenile limped toward its herd, crying out until it vanished into the safety of the group. Concavenator licked a wound on its leg, tasting iron. The pain was sharp, but not crippling. It moved with a slower gait, that night seeking shelter in a rocky overhang. There it rested, its body, curled tail stretched along the stone. Hunger gnawed harder, yet the predator's spirit did not break. The forest always offered new chances. All it demanded was endurance. Morning light poured into the valley, bringing the cries of birds and the buzz of insects. Herds of herbivores moved cautiously across the plains, drawn by the need for water. A group of iguanodonts approached the stream, heads low as they drank. Concavenator watched from the shadows, eyes calculating once more. It had learned from failure. The herd was strong together, but strength often fractured at the edges. A juvenile lingered near the bank, distracted by ripples in the water. Concavenator waited, letting the sun climb higher, until the herd grew drowsy in the heat. Then with a sudden burst it attacked. This time there was no warning. It slammed into the juvenile with crushing force, jaws clamping around its neck. The iguanodont thrashed, but the predator's claws dug deep, holding tight. The herd scattered in panic, bellowing as they fled. Water splashed high as bodies crashed through the stream. Within moments the fight was over. The prey fell limp in Concavenator's grip, blood staining the current red. The predator fed with urgency, tearing flesh and swallowing chunks whole. Each bite restored strength, each swallow silenced the gnaw hunger. Around it smaller scavengers circled, but none dared approach. Concavenator's growl was enough to scatter them into the underbrush. For the first time in many days, its hunger eased. When the feeding ended, only bones and scraps remained. Concavenator lifted its head, blood dripping from its jaws. The forest was alive with sound again, yet for that moment it stood as master of the valley. Its hump rose like a dark ridge against the morning sky, marking its place among the shadows. The dry season reached its fiercest grip. The forests of ancient Spain groaned under the weight of hunger and thirst. Pools had become cracked bowls of mud. Streams flowed in thin trickles over sharp stones. The air shimmered with heat, and the cries of desperate creatures echoed across the valley. For every herbivore, the search for food and water meant risk. For every predator, it meant a deadly gamble. Concavenator moved through this world leaner and hungrier than before. Its hump rose like a jagged sail above the brush, its shadow long across the rocks. Scars traced its leg from the clash with the stegosaur. Hunger drove it forward faster than ever. every sense sharpened by need, every muscle pulled tight as if coiled for battle. One evening a storm gathered far to west. Dark clouds bruised the sky with violet streaks of light flashing inside them. The smell of rain drifted faint and sweet, yet the ground remained cracked and dry. Animals moved with growing desperation, sensing both danger and promise. Herds of iguanodonts shuffled closer to the lowland rivers, their calls nervous. Orthopods gathered in clusters too weary to travel further. Predators circled at the edges, each one waiting for a mistake. Concavenator descended from the ridge, its golden eyes fixed on a single herd moving toward the river. At the center walked a massive iguanodont, bull as muscles, thick as crest broad. Around him young crowded, close protected by vigilant mothers. Such a herd with strength united, but desperation stretched their defenses thin. Concavenator's hunger burned hotter. The predator crept low between the rocks, its eyes never leaving the herd. As it crept, a new sound cut through the valley. A low, guttural roar rolled across the air. It was not from the herd, and not from Concavenator. It belonged to another hunter. From the tree line stepped a rival. Massive and heavy-shouldered, the creature was taller than Concavenator, with jaws that gaped wide and teeth like spears. It was a Torvosaurus, one of the largest predators of the land. The iguanodonts froze in panic. Their eyes darted from one predator to the other. The bull bellowed and stamped, warning his herd to stay close. Dust lifted under their hooves as they shifted in a restless circle. For a moment, predator faced predator across the open field. Concavenator's eyes narrowed. Its body was smaller, swifter, and more agile, yet against Torvosaurus, sheer size meant death in a direct fight. But to yield meant surrendering a kill it could not afford to lose. The air thickened with tension. The herd waited trapped between two predators. The rival roared again, echoing across the rocks. Concavenator answered with his own guttural call, deep and sharp. The valley became a stage of shadows, lightning flashing across the distant storm. Torvosaurus lunged first, driving the herd into chaos. Iguanodonts scattered in all directions, trampling brush and sending stones flying. Concavenator reacted in an instant. It dashed not at the rival, but at the herd. Every step was a gamble, every movement a calculation. If it could separate one prey from the chaos, survival was possible. The bull iguanodont charged at Torvosaurus, bellowing with fury. His massive body slammed forward, striking the predator's chest. Torvosaurus staggered with a roar, its jaws snapping at the bull's shoulder. Blood sprayed as teeth tore flesh, yet the bull held his ground. The herd fled in all directions, leaving one juvenile stranded near the riverbank. Concavenator's eyes locked on the juvenile. Its sprinted tail lashing for balance, claws tearing through soil. The juvenile cried out in panic, stumbling in the mud. Concavenator leapt, jaws wide, teeth flashing. Just as it struck, the ground trembled. Torvosaurus turned, its rage now fixed on the smaller predator. With a thunderous roar, it lunged, jaws snapping. Concavenator twisted away the rival's teeth, closing on empty air. Mud sprayed high as both predators fought for footing. The juvenile fled splashing into the reeds, leaving the predators locked in confrontation. Concavenator circled low, its body tense. Torvosaurus advanced with heavy steps, each one cracking the earth beneath. Lightning split the sky, revealing both hunters in stark silhouette. The storm rolled closer, wind tearing through the valley. Torvosaurus struck, jaws snapping like a trap. Concavenator ducked beneath the strike, claws slashing at the rival's flank. Flesh tore, blood sprayed, but the larger predator barely flinched. It swung its massive tail, catching Concavenator across the ribs. Pain flared white-hot. The smaller predator stumbled, gasping, yet forced itself upright. The clash raged through the mud. Concavenator leapt and dodged again, and again, jaws snapping at the rival's throat, claws scraping across scales. Torvosaurus pressed forward, relentless, each attack thunderous, each strike nearly fatal. The valley echoed with their roars, the storm above answering with thunder. At last Torvosaurus lunged in full force, jaws closing around Concavenator's shoulder. The smaller predator screamed as teeth sank deep. Blood poured down its side, staining the mud. For a moment it seemed the fight was over. Yet in the heart of agony, survival sparked. Concavenator twisted with every ounce of strength, driving its claws into the rival's eye. Torvosaurus roared in pain, its jaws snapping open. Concavenator ripped free, blood streaming. The rival thrashed blinded in one eye. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the predator's hump, rising high as it faced its foe. Every breath tore through its chest, yet every muscle burned with will to endure. The storm broke, then rained, slashing across the valley. Mud turned to rivers beneath their feet. Concavenator circled, once more waiting for the rival's stumble. Torvosaurus lunged again, but its blinded eye left an opening. Concavenator darted sideways, jaws clamping onto the rival's wounded flank. With savage force it tore free flesh, leaving the larger predator reeling. The storm howled wind and rain drowning every sound, yet their roars carried above it. Concavenator pressed its advantage, striking again, and again each wound driving the rival back. Torvosaurus bellowed with rage and pain, but its strength faltered. At last it turned staggering toward the trees, retreating into the shadows. Concavenator stood in the rain's sides, heaving hump rising like a jagged sail against the storm. Blood poured from its wounds, yet its eyes burned fierce. It had survived. Against hunger, against rival, against storm it had endured. The herd was gone, but the predator's claim over the valley had been marked in blood. As thunder rolled across the sky, Concavenator lifted its head and roared. The sound carried through the forest, echoing over the rocks and rivers. It was not just a cry of triumph, but a defiance. In a world where survival demanded, everything had proven its place once more. Rain fell heavy through the night and into the next morning. The valley that had been cracked and dry only days before now shimmered with new rivers running wild over the stones. Trees dripped water in steady streams. Pools formed where dust had once gathered. For many creatures, this storm meant relief. For Concavenator, it meant survival bought at terrible cost. The predator stood alone at the edge of the flooded plain. Its body ached with wounds deep and raw. Blood had been washed away by the rain, but the gashes left behind pulsed with every movement. The mark of Torvosaurus' teeth cut across its shoulder and ribs. Each breath came shallow, every step heavy. Yet it still stood. The storm that had nearly drowned the land now veiled its pain. Rain covered the scent of blood. Water cooled its burning wounds. Concavenator limped toward the shelter of the forest, its eyes sharp despite weakness. Instinct told it that survival was not just about winning battles, but enduring after them. Within the forest canopy, shadows hung heavy with mist. Ferns bent under the weight of water. Insects buzzed in clouds lifted by the storm. Small reptiles scurried over wet soil, their calls sharp and quick. Life rushed to take advantage of the new abundance. Concavenator moved slowly through this world, leaving deep prints in the mud. It paused as small streams swollen with rain, and lowered its head. Cool water rushed across its tongue-quenching thirst that had burned for days. The predator remained there for a long time, drinking, then resting, its chest rising and falling. Its reflection shimmered in the water, showing eyes narrowed with resolve. The jagged hump on its back broke the image like a dark mountain peak. This hump had always set it apart from others. Now it marked a survivor, one who had faced the greatest rival and endured. Time passed, and the storm clouds began to lift. Sunlight pierced through the trees, striking the wet forest floor with beams of gold. Steam rose in curling shapes. Concavenator stretched slowly, testing its strength. Pain still gnawed, but muscles responded steady. It followed the river downstream where the forest opened into a wide clearing. There it saw the remnants of the iguanodon herd. They had regrouped far from the chaos of the battle. Mothers guarded the edges, while the great bull rested near the center. His flank bore deep wounds from the clash with Torvosaurus. Blood stained his side, though he stood tall, defiant against weakness. His herd grazed on fresh shoots sprouting from soil awakened by the rain. Concavenator watched from the shadows. Hunger still carved hollow lines along its ribs, yet it did not attack. Instinct urged patience. The herd was strong together, and the predator still weak. To strike now would mean death. Instead it studied them silently, eyes locked on the young moving at the edges. It remembered the moment one had been within reach, and how the rival's arrival had turned the hunt into war. A deep growl rumbled in its throat, but it turned away. Survival demanded restraint as much as violence. There would be time again when strength returned. For now it needed recovery. The forest would provide smaller prey easy to capture while its wounds closed. Days passed. The rain fed rivers that spread across the land. Plants rose fast, green and lush. Herds moved through the valleys with renewed energy. Predators followed their trails, each one testing the balance between hunger and death. Concavenator healed slowly. Scars formed along its side, pale lines across dark scales. Each day it grew stronger, walking farther, climbing ridges again. One evening, as the sun fell in fire across the horizon, Concavenator returned to the high rocks where it had once watched the valley. Wind swept through the trees, carrying scents of countless creatures. Its eyes scanned the land below. The herd had moved on toward the distant lowlands. In their place, smaller groups gathered by the rivers. Opportunities waited. The predator's chest rose with deep, steady breaths. It remembered the roar of Torvosaurus, the crushing teeth of pain that had nearly ended its life. Yet it also remembered the moment of survival when instinct and will had broken the larger rival's strength. That memory fueled its resolve. This valley was its territory marked not by claim alone, but by survival. The forest grew quiet as night fell. Shadows stretched long across the land. Concavenator lifted its head toward the stars that pierced the clearing sky. Its eyes reflected faint light, golden and fierce. The jagged hump on its back stood tall against the horizon, a symbol of its endurance. It let out a low rumble, a sound not of triumph, but of warning. The forest listened. Every creature that heard it understood the meaning. Concavenator lived still. It had faced storm, rival, and hunger, yet it remained. In this land where only the strong endured, it had proven itself once more. As the moon climbed silver over the valley, Concavenator laid down upon the rocks. Pain lingered, yet strength returned. Its body scarred, yet alive. Around it the land thrived again, rich with water and life. Balance had been restored. The predator closed its eyes, listening to the river rushing far below. For now survival was enough. Tomorrow the hunt would begin again. Morning light spilled across the valley, washing the forest in shades of gold and green. The storm had passed, and with it the scars of battle slowly faded into memory. Water glimmered in fresh streams, cutting silver lines across the soil. Ferns rose in thick carpets, their leaves reaching toward the sun. Life had returned in full force. Concavenator stood tall at the ridge where stone met sky. Its body bore scars that would never vanish, yet each mark told a story of survival. The jagged hump rising from its back caught the sunlight, casting a long shadow over the land below. The predator's golden eyes scanned the valley, calm but sharp. Hunger still burned, but now tempered by patience. Below, herds grazed along the riverbanks, their calls soft against the breeze. Small reptiles darted between roots. Birds took flight with bursts of color against the sky. Every creature moved with purpose, bound by the same rule that shaped them all, to endure in a world of constant change. Concavenator's gaze lingered on the river, where once chaos and blood had stained the earth. Now it flowed clear and strong as though the land itself had healed. The predator shifted its weight, testing healed muscles. Pain flickered and then passed. It had survived storm and rival. It had claimed its place within the rhythm of the valley. No rival roared, now no shadow hunted in its path. For a moment there was peace. Concavenator raised its head and let out a deep rumble that rolled across the forest. It was not the cry of victory nor challenge, but of presence, a reminder to all who heard that the hunter remained strong. The sound echoed between cliffs and trees, fading into the vastness of the sky. As the sun climbed higher, Concavenator descended from the ridge, moving with steady steps. Its shadow stretched long across the rocks, then disappeared into the forest where life stirred unbroken. The hunt would return, the challenges would rise again, yet so too would its strength. For in this land shaped by storm, hunger, and survival, the predator endured and would endure again.